So it's my great honor and pleasure to be with all of you this morning on this auspicious occasion of Lord Jagannath's Rath Yatra festival. So I would like to thank Anand Shesh Prabhu and the Mayapur Institute for kindly inviting me and allowing me to render the service to all the Vaishnavas. So today we are having this orientation session for the Bhakti Shastri course. And I suppose all of you are from different parts of India and maybe outside India. So thank you all very much for participating in this Bhakti Shastri course of the Mayapur Institutes. And so today we will have this orientation session where we would like to focus especially on the importance of studying this Bhakti Shastri course, importance of studying Srila Prabhupada's books in general, and also some specific aims and objectives of the Bhakti Shastri course. So here is a quote from Srila Prabhupada: "Every temple is an educational center." Everyone can see the screen, I suppose.
Yes, bro.
Yes, Prabhu.
Anashishpa, would it be okay if the students can read some of these quotes on the screen?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, fine. So, so one of you can read this quote.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
Dandavat.
Every temple should be educational center. Brahmanas means they are teachers. So every temple should be an educational center. And the Brahmanas should be engaged. They should be properly educated and they should teach others also. In this way, temple means educational in spiritual life. Conversation, August 22, 1976.
Yes. So Srila Prabhupada didn't want our ISKCON temples to be like any other ordinary temple that we find in India, especially where people just go to the temple, they offer respects to the deity present, and they may offer some dakshina, break some coconut, do some puja, and they walk out of the temple. Practically without learning anything or bringing about any change in their lives. And basically people's lives continue as it is. But Srila Prabhupada didn't want our ISKCON temples to be like that. But he wanted our ISKCON temples to be educational centers. And he wanted brahmanas to teach. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada wanted our ISKCON temples to be like universities, educational centers, where people are taught about the philosophy of spiritual life, of Krishna consciousness, whereby they can imbibe this philosophy in their own lives and bring about a change, bring about a transformation in their lives. That was Srila Prabhupada's expectation from our ISKCON centers. Okay, so here we have some norms for classroom. Of course, this is not an actual classroom and this is a virtual classroom. So I don't know how much this would really apply now. Anashish Prabhu, what do you think? We should go through these because much of it won't apply for this, isn't it?
Yes, Prabhuji.
So we can skip it?
There are some things, Prabhuji, like when somebody has to ask questions, those things like.
Okay, okay, those things maybe you can say.
Yeah, okay. Prabhuji.
You want to say them now?
Yeah. In the end, we'll communicate, Prabhuji.
Acha, okay, fine.
End of the classroom.
Okay, maybe this is maybe relevant. We will refrain from borrowing strength from status or position. So as far as the classroom goes, so we all have only one upadhi, one designation, and that is we're all students, irrespective of our other designations in our professional lives or in our spiritual lives. But here, as far as this classroom is concerned, so we all are students, and so therefore we won't borrow any strength from status or position. Okay, this also. Okay, maybe this is applicable. We will each accept full responsibility for success in achieving our desired outcomes. Okay, so yes, the teachers and the institute, definitely we have some responsibility in imparting the lessons and coordinating the teaching. But at the same time, ultimately, it's the students' responsibility to study and take responsibility for the learning outcome. Okay, we'll confront issues of behavior, not people. So we're not addressing any personal agendas here. We will each honor any agreement reached. Okay, that's some norms which could be applicable in this situation. In any case, we will read this quote of Srila Prabhupada on classroom norms. So somebody else would like to read this?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna
Dandavat pranams.
Hare. Then
Just like if you enter into any educational institution, if you don't surrender yourself to the rules and regulation of the institution, how you can get advantage of the knowledge imparted by the institution?
Continue, please.
Everywhere, wherever you want to receive something, you have to be controlled or you have to be surrendered to the rules and regulations. If you do not follow the rules and regulations of this class, it is not possible to receive the knowledge. Bhagavad Gita 7.2, San Francisco, September 11, 1968. Hare Krishna.
Yes. So whenever we want to receive knowledge, so there has to be some surrender, there has to be some obedience, there has to be some submission to the class and following certain rules and regulations. As the Bhagavad Gita says that with the pranipatena. So pranipat means there has to be some submission, and so submission means agreeing to follow certain rules and regulations. And so that submissive attitude is something which is very important in receiving knowledge, something which Srila Prabhupada very often emphasized. So Srila Prabhupada in one lecture, he says that if one approaches a teacher with the attitudes that I already know, and let me just test the teacher, or let me just find out how much this person knows. So if that's the attitude, one can't learn much. Most probably you may be aware of that story which Srila Prabhupada told about two students approaching a Mridanga teacher. So one student asked to pay, say, 50 rupees for learning the Mridanga, and the other student was asked to pay 100 rupees. So the second student, when he came to know about this, so then he inquired as to why he was being charged more. And then the teacher replied, because you already have learned something, some hodgepodge, so then I have to do a double work. I have to first of all erase that and then teach the right things. So therefore double fees. So similarly, if we think we already know and we're just trying to find out what this person knows. So if that's the attitude, we cannot learn much. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada very often emphasized the submissive attitude while approaching any institution or the teachers before trying to understand, especially spiritual knowledge. And so therefore, the attitude is important. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada himself started these 4 Shastri courses, Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, Bhakti Vedanta, and Bhakti Sarvabhauma. Bhakti Shastri has basically these 4 books: Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, and Sri Ishopanishad. Okay, a question for you. What do you hope to achieve by studying Bhakti Shastri? So maybe a few of you could respond to this question.
To enhance our knowledge about Shastras and thereby improve our surrenderness to the Supreme Lord as well as our Acharyas.
Okay, very nice. Yes, to increase knowledge, increase surrender. That's good. Somebody else, please.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
To become strong in preaching and spread this movement of our His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada's movement.
Okay, very nice. Yes, the knowledge is required for preaching. Very good.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Be part of the preaching of Srila Prabhupada and gain knowledge and also preach others so that they can also get into the Krishna consciousness movement.
Okay, very nice. To help others also become Krishna conscious.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
To trying to associate with Srila Prabhupada through his books so that we can understand his mood in which he has written and then try to apply in our lives.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Yes, so that we can understand Srila Prabhupada's mood and try to apply. Very good. Maybe 1, 2 more.
Hare Krishna, His Grace Vamsi Vadan Das Prabhuji, to
Hare
mind
Krishna.
our mind, to mind our mind, to control our mind and be a good Krishna conscious and to spread it. Hare
Okay,
Krishna.
very nice. Yes, to control our minds and become better devotees. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, it helps us to imbibe the Vaishnav qualities also in our
Yes, very
we are-
good, very good. Yes, to imbibe the Vaishnava qualities. Yes, and develop a character.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
To increase the taste in reading Srila Prabhupada's books.
Yes, very nice, very nice. To increase the taste in reading Srila Prabhupada's books. Yes, that's true.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
See the Lord through the eyes of Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, to see the Lord through the eyes of Srila Prabhupada. Very nice. That's good.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhuji,
Krishna.
to develop the submissive attitude towards our scriptures.
To develop submissive attitude towards scriptures. Very good. Okay, fine. So now we will see from Srila Prabhupada a few quotes from Srila Prabhupada as to why he thinks the studying of his books is very important. So this is a quote from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Somebody would like to read this, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Amrita, Madhya Leela, 25.278. All of the devotees connected with this Krishna.
A little louder, please.
All of the devotees, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. All of the devotees connected with this Krishna consciousness movement must read all of the books that have been translated. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and others. Otherwise, after after some time, they will simply eat, sleep, and fall down from their position. Thus, they will miss the opportunity to attain an eternal blissful life of transcendental pleasure.
Yes. So in this quote, Srila Prabhupada is saying, all of the devotees connected with this Krishna consciousness movement, there are no exceptions. So it's not only meant for the juniors or only the seniors. Prabhupada says all of the devotees connected with this Krishna consciousness movement. So if we think we are a part of the Krishna consciousness movement, then this instruction that Srila Prabhupada is giving is meant for us. Sometimes after one spends some years in devotional service, one tends to think that, okay, that reading of the books, all that, that's for new devotees. Now we are senior, now we don't have to read so much of Srila Prabhupada's books. But here Prabhupada is saying all of the devotees, everyone connected with this Krishna conscious movement must read. So Prabhupada is being assertive, must. Not maybe, can, no, must. All of the books that have been translated. All of the books, but of course he is emphasizing, which we will see in so many of his quotes, emphasizing Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Bhagavad Gita, which of course is this is the essence, the most essential books that Srila Prabhupada has given us, and of course, and he says others as well. So if one does not read these books, what's going to be the result? The jiva has only two choices, Krishna or Maya. And so therefore, if one is not engaged in Krishna consciousness, and as devotees, especially reading Srila Prabhupada's books, which is definitely an important aspect of our lives, if we don't do that, then the other alternative is simply sense gratification. There's nothing else to do. That's the only other alternative, and that is eat, sleep, engage in sense gratification, and the result will be falling down from one's position and missing the great opportunity of human life to attain an eternal blissful life of transcendental pleasure. So the purpose of human life is to ultimately go back home, back to Godhead, to achieve that transcendental, eternal, constitutional position of the Jiva. That's the purpose of human life. As Narottam Das Thakur has sung in his famous bhajan, Hari Hari Vifale Janama Gunaino, Radha Krishna na bhajiya, Manushya Janma Paya, Radha Krishna na bhajiya, Janiya Shuniya Vishakhaino. So having obtained this human form of life, if one does not use this human form of life for performance of devotional service, then Narottam Das Thakur is saying one is willingly drinking poison. So if someone poisons and one unknowingly takes, that's one thing. But to willingly take poison, that's real foolishness. But then Narottam Das Thakur says, that's what we are doing if we are not engaging in devotional service. And so therefore, a very important aspect of our life should be to perform devotional service in accordance to what Srila Prabhupada has given us in his books, and then we can achieve the perfection of the human form of life. Otherwise, as the Isha Upanishad also says, that if one, in spite of having the human form of body, in spite of having the scriptures, in spite of having the association of devotees, and of course so many other facilities which Srila Prabhupada has given us, in spite of having all that, if one doesn't utilize the human form of life for devotional service, then one is considered to be Atmaha, the killer of the soul. So that is as good as committing suicide. And so therefore, in order to be fixed in our practice of devotional service consistently, very important that we read Srila Prabhupada's books regularly. Next, somebody else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Study Bhagavad Gita as it is and Srimad Bhagavatam and continue to help your God brothers in developing Krishna consciousness. Develop your preaching in this way, and this will be the most successful and appreciated endeavor. When you study very carefully all of the literatures which are available, especially Bhagavad Gita as it is, you will have in your grasp answer to all questions that may be put to you. Please encourage the others to read this Bhagavad Gita at least one chapter every day. Letter to Upendra, January 6, 1969.
Okay, so here Prabhupada is essentially focusing on 2 points. One thing is to develop the preaching on the basis of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Then the preaching will be successful and appreciated. So that's very important, that our preaching should not be whimsical, based on some mental speculations and concoctions, but should have a strong foundation of philosophical understanding. And so if we are not regularly reading the books, then there is every scope that we will tend to go into the field of mental speculation and concoctions. Whatever we hear, that is what we'll speak, as they speak about the Gigo principle. What goes in comes out. And so therefore, if we're regularly reading Srila Prabhupada's books, then that's what we will speak, that's what we will preach. And that's how we maintain the connectivity to Parampara. That's how we become transparent via media of the Parampara. And that's how our preaching will have great potency. Srila Prabhupada often gave the example of the electric bulbs being connected to the powerhouse. So we could have beautiful electric bulbs and chandeliers and so many things. But if the connection to the powerhouse is not there, then it's all useless. So similarly, we may have a great speaking ability, maybe we're great orators and speakers and can influence so many people, all that may be possible. But if the connection to the parampara is not there, as one devotee gave an example, or maybe Srila Prabhupada gave the example of empty bullets. So our words will be like empty bullets. They may impress the intellect, but they will not transform the hearts. But what do we want? So we want people's hearts to be transformed so that they become favorable to devotional service, ultimately become devotees. That's our goal. But we want that to happen, that connection to the powerhouse, that connection to ultimately Krishna via the medium of the Guru Parampara is extremely important. That's how our preaching can be really successful. And so therefore, your Prabhupada is saying that our preaching should be based on Srila Prabhupada's books, especially the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. The second point Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing here is that if we note the words Prabhupada is using here, study very carefully. Prabhupada is not saying just reading, some superficial reading, just like one reads a novel or something like that. But Prabhupada is saying here, study very carefully. In other places, Prabhupada uses the word scrutinizingly studying. In fact, in one place, Srila Prabhupada also said, cram my purports. That's how Srila Prabhupada emphasized scrutinizingly reading and studying his books, not superficially glancing through them. And what's the importance of that, we will see a little later. But then that's what Srila Prabhupada wanted, a very scrutinizing, systematic study of his books. And here also Prabhupada says all of the literatures which are available. But then he focuses on especially the Bhagavad Gita. And what will be the result if we do that? We will have the answers to all questions that may be put to us. So again, so that's how it will help us in our preaching. Of course, we may have questions ourselves, and so even those questions will get answered. And then, of course, as we're preaching, so many people may have so many different questions. And if we don't have the answers, then we won't be able to instill faith in the people. And so it's not that somebody asks us a question all the time, we can say, oh, I'll get back to you tomorrow. That would be a poor show, isn't it? And so therefore, we must be ready with the answers. And we will be ready if we have done the homework, if we have read the books, then we will be ready with the answers when the questions are put to us. So here, Prabhupada is giving us a great responsibility. And he's saying we must read the Bhagavad Gita at least one chapter every day. So I don't know how many of us are ready for that. But then Prabhupada is saying at least one chapter every day. So anyways, the point is of a regular systematic study. That's what's important. Sorry. Okay, please read.
Hare Krishna. I want you leaders especially to become absorbed in the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and become yourselves completely convinced and free from all doubt. On this platform, you shall be able to carry on the work satisfactorily, but if there is a lack of knowledge or if there is a forgetfulness, everything will be spoiled in time. So especially, you must encourage the students to read our books throughout the day as much as possible and give them all good advice how to understand the books and inspire them to study the things from every point of view. Better to boil the milk very vigorously and make it thick and sweet. That is the best progress. So let us concentrate on training our devotees very thoroughly in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness from our books, from tapes, by discussing always and in so many ways instruct them in the right propositions. Letter to Imsadhuta, June 22nd, 1972.
Yeah. It just reminds me, just very recently actually, Hamsadut Prabhu left this world. So anyway, he was one of the leaders of our movement. So Prabhupada is talking to the leaders here. And so he's saying that the leaders especially must become absorbed. You can see the specific words Prabhupada is using, just like in the previous quote we saw Prabhupada saying, studying very carefully, scrutinizingly. Here he says absorbed. So all this indicates it's not something superficial, but really going deep into the understanding of the philosophy of these books, especially again, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And by doing so, what's the result? We can become free from all doubts. As we see in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he's addressed by names like Madhusudan, Keshisudan, and words like that, indicating that how the doubts are compared to demons. So why the doubts are compared to demons? Because they literally kill our Krishna consciousness. Because if one has doubts, if one is not convinced as to why I should be practicing devotional service, then maintaining steadiness on the path is very difficult. Sometimes an example is given that just like if one is driving the car on a road, say early in the morning, there's nobody else on the road, and then we are going a particular destination for the first time, we are not sure of the roads, and then the road divides into right and left. We don't know which way to go, right or left, nobody to tell us, and we take a chance. We take a right turn, but we're not sure. How fast will we drive? Obviously, we'll drive very slow because we're doubtful whether the road is correct. Because if it happens to be wrong, then one has to come all the way back. So similarly, if one has doubts, then our speeds, our progress in devotional service will be very slow. Because all the time, the mind will have doubts. Should I practice? Should I not practice? Should I be serious? So then it becomes very difficult and the progress is very slow. So therefore, Prabhupada writes, on this platform, which platform? On the platform of being free from doubts and being convinced. On that, if that platform is not there, if there's a lack of knowledge or forgetfulness, then everything will be spoiled in time. So the effects may not be seen immediately, but in time, Prabhupada is saying, into the future, things will be spoiled because of the doubts, because of the lack of conviction, and the lack of seriousness as a result of that. So it's advising the leaders to encourage all the students to read throughout the day as much as possible and inspire them. Another very important point Srila Prabhupada is making here, we may have heard this phrase many times, better to boil the milk very vigorously. Right in 1972, Prabhupada is writing that, boiling the milk very vigorously and making it thick and sweet. So just like when we boil the milk, what happens? The water content of the milk evaporates, correct? You could say something what is unnecessary goes off. So similarly, when one reads the books, understands the philosophy, and practices Krishna consciousness on that philosophical foundation, with great conviction, free from doubts, then all what is unnecessary within our own hearts, within our own consciousness, the anarthas, that will evaporate. That will go away. And then we can actually become wonderful, sweet devotees. Just like condensed milk, very sweet, rubbery. Everyone likes to have condensed milk. Why? Because it's so thick and sweet. So similarly, if the anarthas, which are the cause of all the problems, cause of all the misbehavior and troubles, so all that will be gone, will go away. And then we can actually become wonderful Vaishnavas, a wonderful offering to Srila Prabhupada, the Guru Parampara, and ultimately to Radha Krishna. But in order for that to happen, Srila Prabhupada is saying here, train the devotees very thoroughly. So that training is very essential in order for us to, without a doubt, convincingly practice devotional service and become free from all these anarthas which are troubling us. And thus we can become a wonderful offering for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. Next, somebody read, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dhanva Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Nowadays, it seems that many of the older disciples like yourself are having difficulty. If you do not set the example for younger students and take the responsibility for instructing them in the right line, how will things go on? Try to always study our books and see our philosophy from different lights of direction. Become convinced yourself of this knowledge, and without a doubt, all your difficulties of mind will disappear forever, and you will see Krishna face to face.
Right. So here Prabhupada is making 2 points. Here again, he's addressing some older disciples, and he says that some of the older disciples are having difficulty. And so therefore, it's essential that they set the right example. And so in order for setting the right example, then one must be aware of what's the right example, what's the right behavior, what's the right way of dealing with others, what's the right way to have a Krishna conscious outlook. So therefore, for senior devotees, to set that right example for others is very important. And so if the senior devotees themselves are not reading the books, they don't know the standards of devotional service, then what kind of example they can set for others? Then how will things go on, Prabhupada says. The second point he makes is seeing the philosophy from different lights of directions. Again, he says, always study our books. So you can see Prabhupada again, he uses the word study. He does not just say read. So studying them like people study in schools and colleges. They study engineering books, medical books. So that's, people spend hours and hours. I'm sure all of us have experience of that. So similarly, Prabhupada wants us to study his books and understand the philosophy from different lights of directions. I think so this quote comes once again, so we will focus on that point a little later. But in any case, again, Prabhupada is saying here to become convinced of the knowledge without a doubt, and then the difficulties of the mind will disappear, and then the ultimate goal, the ultimate result of seeing Krishna face to face can be realized. So many of the difficulties, as Prabhupada is saying here, are difficulties of the mind. So the mind influenced by the illusory material energy is very powerful. And so therefore, Maya, through the influence of the mind, is always trying to distract us from our practices of devotional service. And so therefore, in order to escape from the distractions of the mind, the very fickle and unsteady minds, to strengthen the intelligence is very important. because the strong intelligence can control the minds. I'm sure most of us may be aware of the analogy of the chariots. The body is compared to a chariot, and the 5 horses to the 5 senses, the reins to the mind, the driver to the intelligence, and the passenger to the soul. So the intelligence is the driver. So if the driver is very weak, he's unable to control the reins of the horses will run wild. But if the driver is strong, then he can control the reins and then the horses. So similarly, the intelligence has to be made strong by the study of scriptures. Then the intelligence will be able to discriminate what is right, what is wrong, what is shastric, what is not shastric. So that power of discrimination comes from knowledge based on scripture. And so therefore, very important that we strengthen the intelligence on the basis of scripture, and then the strong intelligence will be able to control the fickle minds. Okay, somebody read this, please.
Hare Krishna, steadiness. Yes, as a sannyasi and GBC, your first duty is to read my books. Otherwise, how will you preach? In order to remain steadily fixed in Krishna consciousness, there must be a sound philosophical understanding. Otherwise, it will become only sentiment. Whenever you find the time, please read my books. Letter to Sasvarupa Dasa Goswami, January 5th, 1976.
Yes. So here again, Prabhupada is making 2 points. One thing is, if we don't read the books, how can we preach? So we already discussed that point. So in order for preaching to be effective, to be in parampara, to be shastric, then it's very important that we read the books. The second important point he's making is that in order to remain steadily fixed in Krishna consciousness, otherwise it will become only sentiment. So what does sentiment mean? So sentiment means simply being on the mental platform, as we were just talking about the minds. So mental platform means as the functions of the mind or the nature of the mind is sankalpa and vikalpa, accepting and rejecting. So whatever the mind likes, the mind says, oh, very nice, accept. If the mind doesn't like something, rejects. And in the conditioned state, what does the mind like? Sense gratification, that's all. And so therefore, if something is very conducive to sense gratification, the mind would say, oh, take it, accept. But if it is difficult, if there's going to be some impediment in one's sense gratification, some austerity, the mind will say, no, don't take this. So that's the nature of the mind. And the conditionings of the mind are very strong since time immemorial. And so therefore, if there is no strong philosophical basis, foundation, then one will simply act on the mental platform. And then we could go astray. But then, when the intelligence is strong, when there's a good philosophical understanding, then, as we already mentioned, then the strong intelligence will be able to control the minds. Otherwise, sometimes we do see that in the early stages, in the early years, devotees are very enthusiastic in their practices, but then as years go by, there may be some difficulties, some problems, some misunderstanding with other devotees, and some other maybe physical difficulties, and so on and so forth. And then if one is just on the sentimental platform, then the mind will say, oh, this Krishna consciousness is very difficult, so impractical, forget it. But if one has that strong philosophical basis, and one understands that ultimately the goal of my human life is to become Krishna conscious, if one has that sound philosophical understanding, then in spite of the storms that come in life, which will inevitably come for everyone, as Prabhupada explains in his lectures, devotees or non-devotees, it doesn't matter. The nature of the material world remains the same. Prabhupada gives his own experience as he was traveling on the Jaladuta, and says, just like the waves of the ocean, the waves never will stop, never. And so similarly, the nature of the material world is there are going to be miseries, adhyatmic, adibhautik, adidevik, for everyone, devotees and non-devotees. And so how do we respond in those situations? Very much depends on how we are fixed in our goals, in our understanding of devotional service. So if you just have a superficial sentimental understanding, then when these storms come, there is every possibility that one can just give up. As one senior devotee was saying, fair weather devotees, fair weather devotees. When the weather is good, everything is just the way I like. Devotees are behaving with me exactly the way I want. The prasadam is exactly the way I like. Everything is just perfect. Then I will practice devotional service. But it's never going to happen that way. That's an impossible proposition in the material world. But then, in spite of the difficulties, in spite of the challenges that will inevitably come, but if I'm fixed in the understanding of Krishna conscious philosophy, then I will go on anyways, because I know that these are simply some temporary inconveniences. To achieve the ultimate goal is a very small price. To achieve the lofty goal of the spiritual world of association with Krishna. And so therefore, that foundation of philosophical understanding is something which is very important. Just like the foundation of a building. So we could construct a very huge, beautiful skyscraper building. But then if the foundation is weak, then when the storms come, when the cyclones come, buildings collapse. Sometimes we find in India especially, some buildings collapse. Why? Because they didn't pay attention to the foundation. And there is a tendency not to pay attention to the foundation because that's what is not visible to anyone. Rarely somebody will appreciate a building for its beautiful foundation. Who will do that? Because the foundation is not visible. Similarly, the foundation of our devotional service has to be the proper philosophical understanding. But that tends to be neglected because who sees the foundation? So people tend to get fruitive in their endeavors and try to have those things which are visible to the people of the world. Well, that's important. We're not saying that's not important. Okay. Number of books, number of temples, number of devotees and things like that. The numbers, the number game. Well, that's important. We're not saying that's not. But accompanied, that has to be accompanied by the strong philosophical understanding, a strong sadhana, chanting the holy names, reading Srila Prabhupada's books regularly. It has to be accompanied by that. Then all those results and all our practices of devotional service can steadily continue lifelong and eternally. Otherwise, we may just become like those, I'm sure you all know those Diwali crackers, those flower pots, which for a few moments, very beautiful, it comes on top, all the sparks and flowers and looks so beautiful and dazzling, but within a few minutes it's all gone. So we don't want to become devotees like that. So if we want steadiness, lifelong practices, then the proper understanding is. Okay, somebody read this, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare.
Yes, reading my books will help you. Philosophy must be there. But if you do not also apply the philosophy by participating in all temple affairs, like rising early, attending Mangala Arati, performing devotional service, and then simply learning the philosophy will have no effect. Letter to Dayananda, July 7, 1972.
Yes. So now Prabhupada talks of another important aspect in our practices, and that is, after studying the philosophy, application of the philosophy within our lives. Following the instructions that Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas have given us. And so therefore, rising early in the morning, attending the Mangalarti, chanting our rounds of Hare Krishna, prescribed rounds. For those who are initiated, at least 16 rounds on the beads. Prabhupada emphasized all this within his purports and lectures. Regularly attending the Srimad Bhagavatam class, rendering whatever service is allotted to us by the temple authorities. So that practical application of the philosophy is very important. So Srila Prabhupada didn't want us simply to become dry philosophers. In the Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter purports, Prabhupada writes those very beautiful and important statements, and that is, religion without philosophy will simply become sentimentalism or fanaticism, and philosophy without religion will simply become mental speculation. So therefore, that appropriate balance is very important. So one is the proper understanding of the philosophy, but the goal of that proper understanding of the philosophy is ultimately to apply and bring about a change, a transformation within our consciousness. That is the purpose. Not simply to become dry philosophers and speculators. That's not the purpose. And so therefore, after having properly studied and understood the philosophy, then it's very important that we apply that. And Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that also in so many of his purports and lectures. That one follow the sadhana program that Srila Prabhupada has given us. And as we will be discussing in our discussions of Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, that's very important, because that's what will help us to remember Krishna and not forget him, which is the goal of our practices of sadhana bhakti. Smartavya satatam Vishnu vismartavya najatuchit sarve vidhi nishedasyor etayor eva kinkara. So this is a quote from the Padma Puran, which states that the goal of our practices of devotional service, always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. All the rules and regulations are subservient to this one rule and regulation. And that is always remember Krishna, never forget him. And so therefore, our sadhana practices are meant to help us remember Krishna, purify our consciousness, and then ultimately achieve Krishna. That's the ultimate purpose. And so therefore, one must have that proper balance between the studying the books, understanding the philosophy, and the practical application. As the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, 16th verse says, Shushusho Shadadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Viprapunya Tita Nishevanat. This verse very clearly delineates the balance. So we want that Vasudeva Kataruchi, the taste. Many times devotees ask, how can we maintain the taste in our hearing, chanting, and reading Srila Prabhupada's books? So this verse is explaining, how can we maintain the Vasudeva Kataruchi? Mahat Seva. We can maintain the taste by serving the great souls. And for us, within ISKCON, all services that we render, practical services that we render within ISKCON, our services ultimately to Srila Prabhupada, the Mahabhagavat. And so therefore, by rendering practical services, whatever that may be, within our society, we are actually rendering services to Srila Prabhupada. And then by doing so, by his mercy, we can get a taste for hearing and chanting, for reading his books, for understanding the philosophy. And then we can serve better. We can serve in good consciousness. When we serve in good consciousness, our taste for hearing and chanting will increase. When our taste for hearing and chanting increases, we can serve better. And that's how we make progress in our devotional services. And so therefore, we should not be one-sided. any type of fanaticism, extremes, causes great damage and havoc. And so therefore, one extreme is, okay, I'll just read the books and focus on my hearing and chanting. The other extreme is, okay, only service, service, service. Do practical services, forget the sadhana. So both the extremes are dangerous. And so therefore, the appropriate balance is the golden words. Okay, please read this.
Nothing outside Srila Prabhupada's books. There is no need by any of my disciples to read any books besides my books. In fact, such reading may be detrimental to their advancement in Krishna consciousness, except in certain authorized cases, for example, to read some philosopher like Palilo to make an easy comparing essay comparing his philosophy with Krishna conscious philosophy. But otherwise, all such outside reading should be stopped immediately. It is simply another botheration. If my students cannot even read my own books thoroughly, why should they read others? I have given you TLC.
Teachings of Lord Chaitanya.
Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. What need is there to read Chaitanya Charitamrita translated by someone else? You are right. You are right to stop such reading. Letter to Sri Govinda.
Yes. So here, Srila Prabhupada is not encouraging us to read so many books, to read any books actually, besides those which he has written. And so Prabhupada says, only if someone has some special service, then one can read some outside philosophical books, maybe to make some comparisons, some comparative study. So only if one has some special service from some authority, then there is a need. Otherwise, essentially, one should be fixed and one should stick to reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So sometimes we do find, especially in the present age where there is access to so many books and so much of information, there's an ocean of information which can be so easily available, so easily accessible, downloaded. So it becomes a great challenge to stick to Prabhupada's books. And there's a lot of temptation to read these other books. But it's very important that we have loyalty to our own Acharya first. That loyalty is extremely important because the Acharya is very dear to Krishna. Acharya mam vijaniya. And that loyalty is important for us because after all, who has saved us from this material existence? Who has saved us from going to hell? It's definitely Srila Prabhupada and his followers. Therefore, in order to show our gratitude to Srila Prabhupada, maintaining that loyalty to him, to his books, to his mission, is something which is very vital for our progress. If we don't show that gratitude and loyalty, Krishna is not going to be pleased with our practices of devotional service, how much of a service we may render. And so therefore, very important that our mainstay reading has to be Srila Prabhupada's books for all time to come, not just in the initial years. Sometimes we do find that devotees, after spending a few years in the movement, they tend to think, oh, we have read all of Prabhupada's books, we know all that stuff. Now we will go for other books. His Holiness Gaur Govind Maharaj, in one of his articles, he mentions as to why devotees tend to read or go for reading other books besides Prabhupada's books. And he gives a nice analogy. He says that just like if one is simply swimming on the superficial parts of the ocean, what will one find? One will only find some fish. In fact, millions of fishes. But it's only when one dives deep into the ocean, then one will find the precious stones and gems and rubies. Similarly, for those who simply have a superficial reading of Srila Prabhupada's books, simply glancing through the books as a formality, then that's what happens. Then one will tend to think, oh, Prabhupada's books, it's all the same, there's nothing new. But for those who dive deep into the books, as Prabhupada says, studying them scrutinizingly, systematically, in the association of devotees, then one will find the most precious stones of newer and newer realizations every time one reads. And Prabhupada describes this. You can look up this quote. This is the 4th canto, 30th chapter, verse number 20. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada explains this point, that when one is sincerely reading and studying, then the Paramatma within the heart is so pleased with that effort that the Paramatma gives newer and newer realizations every time we read. Because Krishna is ever new, Nava Yavanam. And so therefore, Krishna and his books, the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, they're not different from Krishna. And so every time one reads these books, because they're not different from Krishna, every time it's new. There is a newer and newer aspect of Krishna that is revealed, newer and newer realizations that are revealed. Therefore, the subject matter never appears to be hackneyed or boring. Rather, every time one reads, one will relish it more and more and more. As we hear Chaitanya Mahaprabhu hearing the same pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, hundreds and hundreds of times from Gadadhar Pandits. So therefore, what is important is the quality of service rendered, the quality of our reading, the quality of our studying, the quality of our hearing. When Krishna is pleased with the quality of the service, then he is pleased to reveal himself in newer and newer ways. That's how one can maintain the enthusiasm in one's practices of devotional service. Now somebody may say, but there are so many books being written by authorized ISKCON devotees. Should we read those books or no? In answer to this, I would like to quote from His Holiness Kadam Kanand Maharaj, who gave this graphic and down-to-earth analogy. And he said that just like in eating a meal, what's the main menu of our meal always? Now, of course, in any Vedic meal, which Srila Prabhupada taught us, and for most Indians, and of course, that's what Srila Prabhupada taught for everyone within ISKCON actually. The main meal always is some chapatis and sabji and rice, dal. That's always the main course of the meal. But does it ever happen that somebody just fills his plate with only chutney or only sweet? Does it ever happen? So yes, chutney and sweet and pickle, that's just a side dish, a little bit. But for all time to come, the main course of the meal remains the same. Similarly, in our reading, in our studying, for all time to come, the main course of our study and reading and hearing should be from Srila Prabhupada. That is what will nourish our Krishna consciousness, because Krishna will be pleased with that. And yes, other books can be basically used as reference books in order to enhance our understanding of Srila Prabhupada's books. Okay, somebody will read this, please.
Understanding
From
of
varieties
the
of
various.
meals, I am very much stressing at this point that of my students shall be very much conversant with the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and that they should read our books very diligently, at least 1 or 2 hours daily, and try to understand the subject matter from varieties of angles. That is
Yes.
Prasad June.
So here Prabhupada is again emphasizing 2 points. And one is, again, you see Prabhupada saying reading the books very diligently, at least 1 or 2 hours daily. This is in addition to what Srila Prabhupada has given us a minimum quota of hearing every day, and that is 1 hour Bhagavatam class in the morning, 1 hour of Bhagavad Gita class in the evening. That's the minimum quota of hearing Srila Prabhupada has given us. And this is definitely in addition to that, at least 1 or 2 hours of reading and studying Srila Prabhupada's books. So that's definitely very important. And the second point is understanding the subject matter from varieties of angles, and that is again indicates a scrutinizing, analytical study, and trying to understand the philosophy from different angles, from different shastras. That means different books that Srila Prabhupada has given us. What does Prabhupada say here? What does Prabhupada say there? And then trying to properly understand, trying to understand how to apply, what could be the challenges in application. So that's the meaning of studying from different angles of view. Okay, somebody else.
In the read and follow. In this books, in my books, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness is explained fully. So if there's anything you do not understand, then you simply have to read again and again. By reading daily, the knowledge will be revealed to you, and by this process, your spiritual life will develop. You may please me the most by reading my books and follow the instructions therein.
Yes. So here Prabhupada says, if you don't understand something, it's not that we have to read some other books. Prabhupada says you read it again. That's the way we understand more and more. By simply reading again and again, then what will happen is, as Prabhupada says here, then the knowledge will be revealed. So we have to understand this very important point that spiritual knowledge is revealed. Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito. So the transcendental knowledge is revealed when one makes a sincere effort to understand in accordance with the Acharya's instructions. And so therefore, what's important is that we read and also follow the instructions. Both are important, as we were discussing the point before. So when both the reading and the following of the instructions is there, then there will be realization. Then there will be conviction. Then we will be steady in our practices of devotional service. Okay, read this.
Serve with knowledge. A devotee in Mayapura once got up to live in the middle of one of Prabhupada's lectures. Where is he going? Prabhupada asked. He has some work to do. A devotee answered. This drew fire from Prabhupada. What work? Nonsense. Unless you hear, what work can you do? It will just be karma unless you hear. We cannot just read the book and do nothing for the spiritual master, but neither can we serve without the knowledge gained by reading the books. As Prabhupada states in the letter quoted above, we must both read the books and follow the instructions. This is the combination that pleases the spiritual master the most. By Satyarupa Das Goswami.
Yes. So this is a famous lecture that Srila Prabhupada gives in Mayapur in 1974. I don't remember the exact reference, but you can find it quite easily because Srila Prabhupada is speaking on Kunti Maharani's prayers, first canto, 8th chapter, one of the verses. And you can hear this. Prabhupada is just beginning his Bhagavatam class, and one devotee stands up to leave. And immediately Prabhupada asks, where is he going? And some devotee says he has some service, some work to do. And Prabhupada immediately says, what work? What work? Simply Ugra Karma. Without hearing, what work can he do? And so Prabhupada says that if we are not regularly reading and hearing, then devotional service will simply become a burden. In the same lecture, Prabhupada continues and he says, if we're not regularly reading and hearing, then the deity, the Archa Vigraha, will simply become Galagraha. That means a huge stone tied around the neck, Galagraha. And Prabhupada says, then you will say, why has my old spiritual master given me this huge burden? That's what will happen. Because there is no impetus, there is no inspiration to practice devotional service without the proper understanding and knowledge. Then it simply becomes materialistic work. Without the proper consciousness, it doesn't become devotional service. It simply becomes some work, which like any other materialistic person is performing. At least the materialistic person gets some remuneration for his work. But if the devotee is not getting any remuneration, after some time it becomes a burden, and he'll say, why should I do this service at all? Forget it. And so therefore, here again, Satyarupa Maharaj, he writes this, that balance is important. We cannot just read the books and do nothing for the spiritual master. That means we have to do some practical services, but neither can we serve without the knowledge gained by reading the books. And so therefore, that appropriate balance between studying the philosophy, reading the books, and at the same time, rendering practical services for the spiritual master and for his mission is very important. Otherwise, Prabhupada in the same lecture continues that if we don't, within our temples, Prabhupada says, within our temples, if there's no regular hearing and chanting, then these big, big buildings will simply become places where pigeons will come, build nests, and pass to. That's all. So Prabhupada is giving a warning that if there is no regular hearing and chanting and reading within our temples, then they will simply become empty buildings. That's all. So therefore, in order to keep the enthusiasm and the fire of preaching going on, it's very essential that we base it on a proper understanding of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so those were some of the quotes from Srila Prabhupada himself as to the importance of reading his books. So now a quote regarding the Shastric courses. Please read.
Hare Krishna. I think you may have already heard that in January of 1970, we will be holding an examination among all our students on this book, and those who will pass shall be awarded with the title of Bhakti Shastri.
Continue, please.
With these examinations, I wish to encourage all my disciples to very carefully learn this philosophy of Krishna consciousness, because there are so many preachers required to bring the message to all the corners of the world. Letter to Mahapurusha, Los Angeles, 7th February 1969.
Yes, so Prabhupada, right in 1969, Prabhupada had this vision. In fact, in 68, I suppose, Prabhupada actually first proposed these Shastric degrees and what should be taught in all of these Shastric degrees. So Prabhupada is a great visionary. And you see, right in the movement, Prabhupada spoke about his various degrees and examinations and devotees becoming conversant with the philosophy. This is another quote. Somebody read, please.
Next January, there will be an examination.
Little louder, please.
Next January, there will be an examination on this Bhagavad Gita. Papers will be sent by me to all centers, and those securing the minimum passing grade will be given the title Bhakti Shastri. Similarly, another examination will be held on Lord Chaitanya's appearance day in February 1970, and it will be upon Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. Those passing will get the title of Bhakti Vaibhava. Another examination will be held something in 1971 on the 4 books Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and Nectar of Devotion. One who will pass these examinations will be awarded the title of Bhakti Vedanta. I want all of my spiritual sons and daughters will inherit this title of Bhakti Vedanta, so that the family transcendental diploma of Bhakti Vedanta will continue through generations.
Continue, please.
Those possessing the title of Bhakti Vedanta will be allowed to initiate disciples. Maybe by 1975, all of my disciples will be allowed to initiate and increase the number of the generations. This is my program, so we should not simply publish these books for reading by outsiders, but our students must be well versed in all of our books, so that we can be prepared to defeat all opposing parties in the matter of self-realization.
Yes. So you see, this is right in 1968. Prabhupada is writing this letter and very clearly mentioning about the Shastric degrees and what should be there within each of these degrees and all that. So Prabhupada himself gave us all these programs and gave us these Shastric degrees, and he expected all of the devotees to take these courses and examinations. And as Prabhupada says here, books are not meant for reading by outsiders. So as Prabhupada said, I'm not reading these books simply for you to distribute, but basically I wrote them for the devotees to read and understand. Okay, somebody read this, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji Dhanavad Pranam.
Done.
Brahmana, Pandita. In this way, we have to understand by studying carefully the philosophy. We have got so many books now, and I want all of my disciples to read them carefully. Soon, we shall be instituting Bhakti Shastri examinations, and all Brahmanas will have to pass. Letter to Upendra, January 7th, 1976. Also, you must see that the Brahmanas are given sufficient time to read the books. Soon, we shall be introducing the Bhakti Shastri examinations, which all Brahmanas will be expected to pass. It will be based on Bhagavad Gita, the Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, Ishopanishad, and the small paper bag books like Essay Journey. A Brahmana should be Pandita. Letter to Vrishakapi, January 7, 1976.
Yes, so Srila Prabhupada, because that time in India especially, the Indians were accusing Srila Prabhupada that the Western devotees didn't have much Shastric knowledge. And so therefore then Srila Prabhupada, he says that yes, so the Brahmanas means not just simply having the Brahman thread, but then they should be well versed in the philosophy. And so therefore he wanted Brahmanas to have the Bhakti Shastri. Okay, so before getting Brahman initiation, therefore now some spiritual masters have made it compulsory. So therefore, because Brahmana means a Brahman is supposed to be learned in the knowledge and the philosophy and then explain that to others. So that's the duty of Brahmanas. Okay, this is an important quote from the Bhagavad Gita. Somebody read.
Hare Krishna.
Name of Bhakti Shastri. After the student studies Vedas under the master of some time, at least from age 5 to 20, he may become a man of perfect character. Study of the Vedas is not meant for the recreation of armchair speculators but for the formation of character. Bhagavad
Yes.
Gita is purpose.
So here, Srila Prabhupada gives an important goal of studying the Shastra, and that is the formation of character. So this is very important for us to understand. Sometimes devotees also undergo these courses and take examinations with a view to simply getting some diploma, some degree, and claiming that, yes, I've done Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava. But that's not, that could be a side goal. But the main goal is to basically study the books, understand the philosophy, live a life on the basis of that, so that we can purify ourselves, purify our consciousness, so that the innate, inherent qualities of the soul are reawakened. The soul, being part and parcel of Krishna, naturally has all good qualities. But now those good qualities have been covered over by layers and layers of material contamination. The process of devotional service is meant to remove those layers of material contamination so that the natural, inherent, divine qualities of the soul become manifest, and the person develops good character. That's what the Bhagavatam 5th canto explains. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavata kinchana sarver gunays tatra samasate surah harava bhaktasya kuto mahad guna manorethe nasti dhavatam. So by practice of devotional service, yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana. So by practice of devotional service, sarver gunays tatra samasate surah, all the good qualities of the Sura. Sura means the Devas. They become manifest. That's what is supposed to take place. In fact, Prabhupada writes and purports to the Bhagavad Gita that this is actually the test, that one is actually progressing in devotional service, that one is developing these divine qualities, one is developing the character. That's the purpose. So our goal of studying the scriptures is not simply to become either armchair speculators or simply scholars, dry scholars. There is no dearth of scholars in this world. There are so many people, especially in India, who know the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, can recite all the verses and can speak eloquently. All that may be there. But then, how much is one actually able to live a life on the basis of that philosophy? That's important. If people see that one is speaking big philosophy and big lectures, but is not living according to that, people will not be inspired to take up to devotional service. But when people see that one is walking his talk, then that inspires people. That's one of the main reasons why so many people were attracted to Srila Prabhupada, because they saw that here is a person who is living by what he's saying. As we know, the person Bhagavad and the book Bhagavad. The person Bhagavad is one who leads his life on the basis of the book Bhagavad. In present age, in modern days, we find that so many so-called sadhus, they may speak big things, but then they have no character. And that has destroyed the faith of so many people, not only in those personalities, but in religion per se. Because when people see that those who are supposed to be protectors of dharma, followers of dharma, when they are not following, they're only speaking, it breaks trust. And so therefore, it's very important for us to live a life of character based on the scriptures. That's the main goal, as Prabhupada writes here. there's one very interesting episode in the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. When Srila Prabhupada was in the US, once one lady who was doing some PhD thesis on religious movements, she came to meet Srila Prabhupada. And so she began by asking, Swamiji, these days we find so many teachers, gurus, and swamis coming from India to the West. What do you think this will have effect on American culture? And Srila Prabhupada replied by saying, American culture? What culture are you talking about? So Prabhupada didn't give any straight answer. So she was getting that sort of answer. She was not getting anything substantial for her PhD thesis. And so after some time, she said, Swamiji, so now let us discuss something about your philosophy. And Srila Prabhupada immediately shot back. He said a very important statement. He said, philosophy without character has little or no value. So it's very important that the philosophical understanding has to be accompanied by the practical application, by the character. Otherwise, there won't be much effect in one's own life, nor in the lives of others. Because as we know the famous saying that actions speak louder than words. Or it's also said, your actions speak so loud, I can't hear what you say. And so therefore, we have to understand that one of the most important goals, or rather we could say the most important goal in our study of scriptures should be to imbibe the philosophy within our own lives, to imbibe the values that the Shastras teach us, and bring about a revolution in consciousness and the formation of character. So here, this is knowledge, skills, values. So there has to be knowledge and then some skills, but ultimately the values have to be there. So therefore, in the processes or in the stages of gaining knowledge, there are 3 steps. So first there is Shravanam, hearing the knowledge from the teacher, but it doesn't end with that. There has to be Mananam, there has to be contemplation. Srila Prabhupada did give the example of the cow who eats the grass but then ruminates. So similarly, there has to be Mananam, there has to be contemplation on what one has heard, what one has read. So gaining an intellectual understanding by reflecting on what is learned. So one can reflect on what I've heard, what I've read. One can discuss with other devotees and then discuss on how to apply within our lives, what could be the challenges, how to overcome the challenges. That mananam has to be there. Then one will actually apply. Then the 3rd stage, nididhyasnam, and that is realization, living according to that realization. Then there can be steadiness in one's practice. Also, it's said sometimes 4 stages which are similar. So one is aditi, that is learning the subject. Then there's bodha, which is similar to mananam, to gain insight and proficiency. And then acharan, that is similar to nididhyasana, realizing the purpose of it, living according to that learning. And then finally also prachar, giving the knowledge to others, which helps us to realize the knowledge as we preach to others. Yes, so there has to be some aim in our Shastric study, some goals. Please read this.
Hare Krishna. If you have no goal, there is example. Man without any aim is ship without any rudder. So, suppose if airplane is going with an aim to land in some country, but if he goes on simply without any aim, then there will be disaster. So, without aim, what is the use of practice? That is foolishness. Without goal, practice.
Yes. So, just like if a pilot is just driving the airplane, doesn't know where to land, then he may land in the ocean. So that's foolishness. So similarly, if we are simply studying the scriptures, but we don't have a definitive goal, we are just reading for the sake of reading something superficially, so then we will land nowhere. We'll get nowhere. So therefore, we should have very fixed goals and aims. And so therefore, there are also some aims for Shastric study for the Bhakti Shastri course within your handbooks. So you can go through them. And some preaching application, personal application, and developing some values and character. So there are some fixed aims, and there should be some aims of the Shastric study. Okay, so one of the aims is mentioned here, that's to appreciate the mood and mission of Srila Prabhupada. That's also one of the aims of Shastric study. So now coming to some practical things. So the Bhakti Shastri assessment. So there's open book assessment, and that is various essays which are judging one's understanding and not simply memorization. So the open book assessment essays are there. So you'll find at the end of every unit. So you can see in the handbook, there are 5 units for the entire Bhakti Shastri course, 3 units based on six chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, and then 1 unit on the Nectar of Devotion and 1 unit on the Ishopanishad, the Nectar of Instruction. So for each of the units, there is all this assessments. So there's open book assessment, which constitutes 65% of the assessment. Anyway, that's not so important because one has to pass in each of these categories for each of the units. Okay, so it's not just a combined pass, but one has to pass in each of these categories for each of the units. So for the open book assessment, the pass percentage is 60%, and there's closed book assessment, which is basically memorization of some key facts and figures mentioned in the scripture and also some analogies. The passing percent is 65%, and there's verses, there's a list of verses, 45 verses minimum. The list is there in the handbooks, the passing percent is 65%. Then also there is some percentage for attendance and sadhana and things like that. We already discussed on the importance of sadhana. And then finally, class participation. So this is the basic assessment for the Bhakti Shastri course for each of the units. And one has to pass in each of the units in each of these categories. Okay, so Prabhupada's quote on assessment and writing. Please read.
Prabhupada always encourages devotees to write. Realization means you should write, every one of you. What is your realization? You write your realization. What you have realized about Krishna, that is required. It is not passive. Always you should be active. Whenever you find time, write. Never mind 2 lines, 4 lines, but you write your realizations. Sravanam Kirtanam. Writing or offering prayers, glories. This is one of the functions of a Vaishnava. Lecture in Los Angeles.
Okay, so writing the essays, this helps us develop our own realizations. Okay, lesson 1 is setting the scene, preface, chapter 1.1 to 22. That's that anyway, Anshish Prabhu will tell when this will start, but then hopefully that's what is going to start. And okay, so this is what we have discussed. So there's one more thing which we would like to briefly touch upon as we are seeing the open book assessment, that is the essays. So we would like to briefly touch upon how to write essays. I'm sure many of you have some knowledge about writing essays from schools and colleges. So, but just to put it in proper perspective. So a few guidelines for open book assessment, that is writing the essays. So presentation and style. Now this applies if it's a hard copy, leaving room on the page. Usually left side, you leave a margin for comments. But of course, if it's soft copy, then of course it's different. Then divide the essay into sections and paragraphs. Okay, so when writing an essay, it's not that it's just an ocean of words, but then it's good if you could divide the essay into, as I said, give subheadings, bullet points. So divide it into sections and paragraphs so that things become very clear. Then follow sequential development of concepts. Okay, so everything must flow. It's not that things are just random points without any connection. So there must be connecting statements and the whole thing must flow. I hope you understand what I mean by that. So one thing must flow into the next. So there must be continuity and the entire thing must flow. So sequential development of concepts and an introduction and conclusion. So an introduction and conclusion should always be brief. So in introduction, we are introducing the subject or introducing the concept in a few lines as to what we are going to present. And similarly, the conclusion is just a summarization of what has been said. So in an introduction and conclusion, there must be no new concepts, something, new points or analogies or things like that introduced or mentioned in the introduction and conclusion. And there must be a focus, that is a focused and concise response responding to the question. So not beating around the bush, as they say, okay, but being very precise and focused on what's the question asked and what I'm supposed to reply or what I'm supposed to write. Okay, so it should be very focused. So there are marks you will see in your handbook also. There's an Excel sheet. And so there are marks for writing concisely and not writing irrelevant things. So if you write too many irrelevant things, then your marks will be reduced. So not like in the outside world, sometimes people think you fill up too many pages, then you get more marks. But filling up too many pages sometimes is a great trouble for the assessor, for the teacher. The more trouble you give the teacher, the less marks you get. So avoid additional irrelevant philosophical information. Do not exceed the word limit. I think so normally we have a word limit of some 800 to 900 words. And yes, so one can quote with exact reference to support your points. So a quote means some as it is words, sentences from Srila Prabhupada's writings, that's a quote. And whenever you write a quote, there must be a reference as from where it is. So you can write quotes, but please mind that the entire answer should not be quotes, as it is quotes. We have written as it is. No. Most of the answer should be in your own words. In fact, quotes can be only 20% of the answer. Only 20% of the answer can be quotes. 80% of the answer should be in your own words. And then, of course, when we quote something, then we should be explaining as to why we are quoting that. So we could quote statements, we could quote verses, we could quote part of verses to support our philosophical points. Yes, specific phrases from verses, purports, lectures, and do not include long quotes without any explanation. So quote means it has to be precise, brief. Okay, so those are some points on how to write essays. Okay, fine. So, so this is what we have discussed today. So basically, we have discussed about the importance of reading Srila Prabhupada's books, and we also discussed about why to stick to Srila Prabhupada's books, not reading too many other books, and also the importance of practically applying the philosophy and following the instructions what Srila Prabhupada has given us in these books. And we also discussed about the aims of Shastric study, and also the assessment of the Bhakti Shastri course, and also something about the open book essays. Okay, fine. So that's all what I have to say. Thank you all very much for your kind attention.